My name is Tamarella Kreisworth, and I'm here with the Arizona Ground Game. Marlene Bluestein will be presenting with me. We are on the steering committee. Joy Williams, she's our snacky person. She brings all the good snacks. And then Tig and Ed are in the back. There she is, Tig and Ed. They're the cartography team. I would like to know if all of you know each other. No. Take 30 seconds and introduce yourself to someone, because you guys are working together with amazing people. Just introduce yourself to someone that you don't know. Hi, I'm Can't hear me. I thought I had teachers. So, thank you. The hum, the hub, the energy, this is what we're all about. So the mission of the Arizona Ground Game, obviously we want to make a difference in who is up there in our electorate, who we elect. But it's building community, because they've won if we remain divided. It's just, they've won. And you guys actually, you're one of the early adopters. You know, you didn't wait for someone else to go and do something. Pretty much probably after the November election, all of you said, what the? And it started coalescing, right?
Used expletives after one.
Yes. So we are talking to a more engaged crowd than in some cases. So when we started, our mission is to encourage active citizenship, but through public policy information. So people like the gal who was saying you're going to talk about the Arizona legislature. That's one of the first things we did. People just don't understand why it works. So we did a PowerPoint slide this time. Mostly we wing it, but because we're taking this more on the road, we've been to Pine Top 2 years ago, we've been to Yuma 2 or 3 times. This is the first time we're here. We didn't want to screw up, so we created a slideshow. So next.
And just to add on to that, yes, we sort of wing it, but we don't really wing it. And I just want to say, don't be surprised that we're sort of a tag team. So we do interrupt each other, but we expect to do that. We plan to do that. So, but I want to say one thing, and we'll talk about it later. As the one thing that we don't ever wing is that we have monthly forums where we do educational presentations to the entire community, not just to the Pima County Democratic Party, not just to each other, but to the entire community. We do it all throughout Pima County at different venues, so we reach different demographics on a regular basis, and they're very well planned. And maybe at some point we can show you those forums as well.
We've recorded them, and many of them are on our website, azgroundgame.org. So that's our core group. Next slide. This is going to be our agenda. We'll follow it as closely as we can. We're going to introduce Bunny. Bunny's on our steering committee. She broke her hip. She was supposed to be here today. She usually does a 45-minute solid introduction into the Constitution. She is amazing. She's a teacher. She was an education attorney for the TUSD School District. So we're going to have her for about 15 minutes on FaceTime. That's our mission statement. Next. Okay. So who here has done a lot of canvassing prior to 2016, like prior to elections? Very nice. So what happened with us is our core group of steering committee people are people that have done this year in and year out. We go in, we're good doobies, we say, give us our packet, give us our little, holder for all of those 10,000 flyers that we drop off at people's doors, and we're gonna go, change this world. We're gonna go out there and get people to vote, right? And every 2 years, and what's happening? We don't see the change, and the people whose doors we knock on look at us like, who are you? You don't look like me. You came to my door 2 years ago. Nothing happened in my life in 2 years. Why should I listen to you again? And so this election brought all of us together, volunteers that have been working and knocking on doors in Pima County for Grijalva, and I mean, it's just, we all said, why are we're just following. We need to lead. This is ridiculous. We're not getting anywhere, and we feel like we're constantly reinventing the wheel. Why should we sit there and figure out, oh, what map should we go to? Oh, which precinct needs help? It's silly. So it's the process that we hope that you guys will engage with, and it looks like you've already started. We talked to Sally. We stayed at her lovely house. By the way, thank you very much for housing us, everyone. So is that you have to start closer to home, because when you start closer to home, you have more of an opportunity to get people to really learn what's going on in the legislature. So go ahead, next. Okay, so this is what the office looks like consistently, right? Every single campaign office that you go to. And this is what pisses me off beyond belief. So, if you don't think that there's not enough money in politics, I'm going to have Marlene hold this numbers. Do you think this costs money? How about that? How about, hold on, I'm going to find the best one yet. How about this one? It has 2 stickers. Do you know how much this cost? A fortune. And what we're fighting is a fortune if we only try to get out there 2 months before an election. They've already been skewed. They've already been convinced that Garcia is going to open the floodgates and have everybody walk across the border. We have no opportunity to change someone's mind if they've already been convinced by millions and millions of dollars. So our concept is step it back a little bit. And I don't want to be preaching to the choir. I know you guys have already done an amazing job. But it's really, we're just reinvigorating the process that you've already started. We've got to start early. We've got to start in our neighborhoods. Sorry. And it also pisses them off too. How many times can you come to a door? How about as a volunteer, you go knocking on the door, you've taken your time, you're not with your family, you go to the door and this whole stack of flyers are there, right? Or you go to the next door and they say, the next time someone knocks on my door, I'm not voting. Has anyone had that happen? No? Yeah, actually, it's the Democrats. So, but I'll take that as it is. So it turns them off. Next slide. So we want to work with the Javelinas in our own community. We want to work right there, nudging that garbage can, because that's where we're going to make the most difference, right? So if we start now, and I knock on my neighbor's door now, and I know that they're a great voter, you're going to have, we'll go through the packets, Tig will explain the packets, they're a great voter. I just want to say, hey, I'm here. The propositions didn't quite go as well as we planned, but if you have any questions in the next year, call me. I'm not going to bother them again until the propositions come out, because they're 4x4. Everybody knows what a 4x4 voter is? They're a 4x4 voter. Tig will go into that. But those people that... Not everybody knows. No. They voted in each of the last 4 elections, primaries and general elections, midterm elections. So let's take a look at where we were when Obama was in office. and where we were headed, right? Consumer Protection Bureau, but a good idea?
Yes.
Right? Gone. For-profit colleges that take, DACA, marriage equality, the minimum wage, affordable care, mission standards. I mean, we were really chugging away, right? We were getting there. But it was too much for corporate America. It was too much for those people that were controlled and were going to lose their money. So here we go. Next slide. So what do we do with all your brain power? Here's all of you people in this room. Could you imagine the scientific advances we could be having? Could you imagine the support that we could have with emission standards and solar and medicines and everything if we weren't sitting here fighting and fighting and fighting, but we had to fight the good fight? I'm going to hand it over to Marlene.
This is really important. We've all been participating in all kinds of marches, all kinds of demonstrations, all kinds of activities. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. But what we need to do, and it's we need to capture all the energy that happens in all those marches, but those marches only happen a few times a year. I mean, we had a really sustained movement this past year with Red for Ed, but still, it's only a few times a year. We want to take all of the energy in those marches and get all the people who go to those marches, all of you, all of us. You see Tamarella and I there. That's Tamarella's back. But bring them together and bring them back to the people we work with, we live close to, we see on a regular basis. Some of those people can't go to marches, don't believe in marches, but they do potentially believe in the importance of our society and making our society a better place. So we want to capture that energy and work together with everybody who organizes those marches. We're always at them. We're tabling, we're walking around with our petitions, we're doing all of that. But we're also gathering names, we're also getting more volunteers to come back with us and do the long game, the sustained effort. But what we want to do today is we recognize that you guys have a busy Saturday. You know, it's commencement. Obviously, nobody here has anybody graduating, but it's a busy Saturday. People have busy lives. But we want to know what brings you guys here today. What's your passion? So we'd like to write down some of those things and have you guys shut up.
Yep. We didn't have a place really to put it up, so
Just open that door. It's on the other side.
okay.
What do you have to say, Jackson? Why are you here today?
Yeah, right.
Well, one of the things I'm interested in is like the message, like eye-catching, attention-getting messages, which I think you guys, the things that I've seen would help us with.
Messaging.
Messaging, okay. Pass this to Lynn. Flip LD6.
Yes.
Lift LD6. Oh, flip. Well, lifting it too would be lifting it to a better place.
The reason I'm here is that I'm sick of seeing kids gunned down. Right? And the problem is that the incubator for those kids, those uneducated white kids, are the Republican neighborhood. So I want to start an outreach program to those neighborhoods in Dover Park. That's what I'm here for.
I'm here because when I am discussing politics, which I try not to discuss with my family members that don't agree with me, I really don't know how to politely, or I don't know how to make my point without it causing a fight. So I need to come up, I need to learn how to plant some seeds without getting into an argument.
And that's one thing that Bunny's going to talk about.
We certainly recognize that that is a huge issue. I mean, huge. And every nonpartisan and Democratic group across the country is going to have to learn how to do that. Because we got out the Democrats, but now we have to get out those others.
I want to learn some strategies today about how to
do that neighborhood canvassing and create sustained relationships and sustained enthusiasm for this mission that is so important to everybody in this room. I sometimes have a hard time generating the enthusiasm in somebody else. So,
I'm here because at the last election I saw a lot of wasted effort. I'd like to see us move toward being more efficient and putting all the hard work that we're putting in and making it useful rather than, like you said, coming up to a door that's been canvassed 6 times already.
Exactly. Anybody have? Yeah. We're going to accomplish all of this today. But this is your blueprint.
Many of you probably have already had this wonderful experience where it's becoming almost one of the toughest fights to overcome the cynicism that not only radiates from our own federal and state governments here, but from the very people's doors who we knock on. And I don't know how many times I got that in my face, and I understood it, that why am I even doing what I'm doing? It's useless. And which I said, it's only useless if we allow it to be useless. And cynicism's okay as long as you're still going to do something about it. And so that to me has been the biggest thing to overcome, at least in the last year or so.
And they have right to be cynical.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's in fact, it's been beaten into the whole political culture of this whole country.
I would like some good tools to minimize the emotions and address and teach civility.
I would like to learn ways to engage our youth more. I know my high school kids are all engaged, but there's that millennial group that's getting engaged in our community, but we still aren't bringing them out to events and things such as this.
I'm here partially because I saw this group in Pine Top last year, and one of the things, I worked on campaigns for a long time, and I feel like sometimes in the party there's a lot of institutional inertia but not new thinking, so I like the way that they're rethinking how to canvass and stuff and not just sort of doing it the way we've always done in Arizona and always end up losing by like 2 or 3 points or sometimes more.
We actually try to call it, don't call it canvassing, we call it effective communication to our community.
So I'm here because, and I'm not sure if these stats are still the way it is, but from what I've heard, in Arizona, there's 35% Republicans, about 32% independents, and about 30% Democrats. And what happens in the end with independents is toward the election, they either don't vote or they ditch and vote Republican. So we've got a really huge issue here because we're kind of like always at the short end of the stick. So I feel like I would like to learn conversations that are actually more engaging, thought-provoking, with deeper information. And I did feel like I spent a lot of time canvassing last fall, and I did a lot of advocacy throughout the year before that, and I felt like preaching to the choir is not very effective or efficient use of time. So anyway, any new?
Why did you say they would vote switch and vote Republican?
Just that's what I've heard with the statistics. I'm from Sedona, and I was involved with a lot of the political stuff, and that's what what we heard. And I also went to the boot camp that they had. We had a political camp candidate boot camp.
And they thought the independents voted Republican.
Yeah, the independents, when at the end they ditch and vote Republican. Either that or they don't vote. And my experience, of course, from canvassing is like the slam on the door, or they don't want the information, they don't want anything. So I'd like to be able to, we need to work, I think, with the independents and the millennials. There's not that many young people in Sedona, but there's some. I know you've got a lot more in Flag, but I feel like we really do need a whole new level of, like canvassing was great in the past, but it's not working anymore. We need social media and all that, who knows what,
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Thank you.
I'm here because we have a humanitarian crisis on our border. We all live in Arizona. We know about this. Well, most of us do. People are dying in Border Patrol's custody, and that has to be changed.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. I'm hoping we can impart some wisdom. There is a ton of wisdom here. You guys are probably able to look at this more. In Pine Top, we want to learn from them about rural policing because we have an LD in Pima County has nobody. They don't have a chair. They don't have a functioning democratic system there. We are nonpartisan, but we are issue-based. And it just so happens that the Democrats support our issues. I'll argue all day long that we are nonpartisan, right? And I don't want anyone to say any different. And we've had really heated arguments with people that have come to say that we're not nonpartisan, and pull me aside anytime. So, Nancy McLean, have you guys read her book?
Yes.
It's a tough one to read. You have to stop and start and like have a glass of wine in between. But it's an amazing history of what has been happening and right in front of us. It's not like they've been hiding it. It's been happening right in front of us. Just making sure that those that do not fit their niche, do not fit corporate America, are not the same color or the same religion or whatever, are really pushed out of the system. And Citizens United was just, the topper on the cake for them. So she is awesome. She's been to Tucson 3 times. We have the book festival there. Do you guys have a book festival here?
Yes.
You do? You really do get an opportunity, and that's one of the things. Use your venues. If you know you have a good author that's coming into town, you know that there's another organization that has something going on, spread it out there. Use that as an opportunity for you guys to keep your group together, to keep people excited. Next. So there's been articles written that Arizona hates solar power. I mean, literally, scientific pieces as to what the hell is going on with Arizona. Yuma, how much sun Yuma has, right? And the conversation about the Arizona Corporation Commission never really comes up. It's like, who is that? I'm sure all of you guys know that the Arizona Corporation Commission is the reason why we are not, and APS, but they're tied, right? That we don't have, we're not more advanced in solar power. The industry it would create, the amount of jobs it would create, and us being on the forefront, and maybe those solar panels can be created here, for crying out loud, instead of in China. So these are the things that we do when we have our forums, is we bring someone in that has previously participated in a variety of different either energy issues or water issues or whatever, and discuss this so people understand how important, and we have 3, right? 3 coming up.
And this really responds to some of the comments that you guys made earlier, that in terms of your passions. I mean, nobody really mentioned solar power, but that's not the point. The point is, we need to educate each other about all of these issues. None of us are going to be experts on all of them. I learned a whole lot about the Corporation Commission, and I thought I was a really knowledgeable person, and was able to research stuff, etc., but learned a lot. We're actually doing that forum again. It was incredibly well attended. But what this is a response to is, how do you have civil conversations with your community, with your neighbors? You don't have to come in and say, I'm a Democrat. You can come in and say, I'm really concerned about the healthcare crisis or children dying on the border. That's not because I'm a Democrat. That's because I'm a physician, and that's because I'm a physician. I'm a concerned person. I want to change things, and there's plenty of Republicans who feel that way too, and certainly plenty of independents who feel that way. So when you're meeting your community and your neighbors, you talk about these issues that really go across the gamut. I mean, not everybody's going to be responsive to everything, but you're going to find the issue that your neighbor is responsive to. So keep that in mind rather than the candidates and anti-Trump stuff. I mean, it's so easy to talk about Trump. I mean, he's such a vile person, but we have to move off of that kind of a statement and move on to where people care. At our LD meeting, even at my LD meeting, we spent a whole A lot of time we had people from Casas Elitas, Catholic Community Services. Our community has done an amazing job at reaching out to asylum seekers. We had them come and talk, and it really motivated our volunteers and our precinct committee people to get out and volunteer too, and to get out and reach out to people who they normally wouldn't talk to about political stuff.
Someone here talked about, how do you have that conversation with someone that doesn't believe how you believe, right? In reality, it may not be that they don't believe it, right? So the one thing that we've been so lucky to have is Bunny, because she brings the Constitution back in their face. They want to be a constitutionalist? Well, have they read it? Right? And so I'm going to introduce Bunny here, and we'll do the best we can. And Phil helped us, and I think it's going to work really well with the speaker. Go ahead and give her a call. Get rid of the menu. So Bunny was an attorney for TUSD School District, and she's also been a counselor and
a teacher.
And a teacher.
There she is.
Hi, Bunny.
Hi, Bunny. Hello. Hi, Bunny.
Hello. Okay, let's see if we have volume up. How you doing, sweetie? I'm doing okay. Am I in the right place?
Yes.
You are in the right place. Okay. Is that? You look like this? Oh, it may echo. Go ahead and talk, sweetie pie. Hi, Toots.
Can you hear us?
Oh, yes, I can. Can you hear me? Can you hear?
Sound.
Tell her to turn up her volume.
Turn up your volume.
Her turn up her volume?
No, her volume won't do
Get closer to the mic.
This is the one. My volume is all the way up. All right, hold on. Yes, it's on. Go alleviate the equipment.
Bunny needs to get closer to her mic.
Bunny, can you get closer to your mic?
Yes, I think so.
That's
There you
better.
go. That's it.
Closer.
Better?
Yes.
Hold it
Close.
close.
It's not coming from there for some reason. Yeah.
I'm moving my computer closer to me.
Good.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Does that work?
Is your volume of your computer up as high as it can be?
Yeah.
She said yes.
Yeah, I think what happened.
Well, go ahead. We can listen if we
Now it is.
stop
I'm
talking.
going to turn this off. I see everybody.
Oh.
Hey.
Way to go,
Hi,
Phil.
everybody.
Hi.
Now we're good. Okay, we're ready. Okay, hi, everybody. Good morning. How are you?
Good.
Good. Well, I'm telling you right now, I'm first flying a little bit by the seat of my pants here, because I've changed the approach and a little bit of content I thought I was going to do. So I hope you'll bear with me. And hi, Joy.
I wasn't calling you honey, I was calling Titi.
I did throw you right in front of my face.
Sorry.
It's okay. I'd like to talk today about the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, our founding documents. My understanding is that maybe all of you folks in the audience today have a certain amount of good, solid knowledge about those documents, about our founding documents. But the context that I want to talk to you about them today has to do with how we can change the frame, change the context of conversations that we seem to have fallen into about everyday issues in our community, how we have sort of lost our American community in a way, if you will, in my words, and how we can get that back by going back to the very premises that are included in our founding documents when taken whole and read with what I consider to be an open mind and an open heart,
and to rethink what those words actually are, so that as a community we can come together accepting that at least so far what the documents actually say, we can agree on that. Now what happens after that, we can disagree about what it means, how we use those ideas that are embodied in those documents. Those are all things that we are supposed to, as Americans, in my view, have vigorous public debates about. Because we live in a country where we are required to walk and chew gum. We have to do two things at once. We have a public life and we have a private life. And our public life is often referred to as the general welfare, the public square. In my view, that is where government actually comes into play. Our private lives are our lives as individuals, where our personal preferences rule the day. And government doesn't have so much of a role in telling us what to do and what not to do in those areas. Oftentimes, these are areas that are covered by religious institutions or spirituality or whatever you call it for yourself. But at times, the government doesn't get to tell you how you have to behave. Governance has to do with sort of being a referee in defining how we behave, how we act when we are in contact with community, when we are with neighbors, when we are reestablishing an American community. How do we act with and towards each other? Private stuff is how we believe, what we think. It doesn't have to do so much with how we act, primarily, as how we believe, what we think. So today I want to talk. I'd like to take an issues-based approach on what we say in the few minutes that I have to be with you today. And I understand what I'd like to start with is, besides you accepting, at least for purposes of our talk today, that there is a pride and a public part for all of us in the United States of America. This is not true in many countries in the world, but it is here. That government is the thing that helps us keep from hurting each other in the communal aspects of our lives where we tend to bump into each other. And we can't do that because then each of us somehow is impeded from enjoying the full worth of our being here in this country and doing as we, most of the time, pretty much as we please, as long as we don't hurt anybody else. So government helps us with those rules. And I want you to perhaps just accept the fact that that is why government is necessary. If you do that, I believe that you got some handouts from me, hopefully. One of them is about James Madison. I won't read it today, but it's James Madison's reasons why government is necessary, why a constitution is necessary. And I encourage you to read that on your own time and think about it, because he didn't believe in the perfectibility of mankind. And as we would say today, as language has evolved over time, we don't just talk about mankind, we often talk about humankind. So we take in all types of human beings, not just men. So that's a natural evolution word that is over time. And although the original documents always talk about men. So in order to have conversations which are kind of old, but in a new context, you first have to know, I believe, what the words are that we're talking about. What do our founding documents actually say? I want to do a very quick little thing, and if any of you have done this before, I ask you to please keep secret. But, Noelle, do you have those written down?
I screwed up.
I'm sorry?
Nope. I need my
It's okay. I'll just, if you can write them down yourself, so I'm going to give you 10 words, okay? So jot them down. The first one is freedom. Second one is man.
What?
Third one is God.
Man.
God. Man.
Man.
Industry. Capitalism. Fairness. Science. woman, equality, and peace. Okay, those 10 words, only one of them appears in the Constitution of the United States. Anybody want to guess which one it is? And if you know because you did this before, please don't say.
We have a man, we have a God.
What's the question? Only one appears in the Constitution.
Freedom.
So which one is it?
So we have one freedom, one man, one God. Anything else?
Fairness.
Okay, very good guesses, you're all wrong. I feel bad, I've done this with groups of lawyers who've gotten it wrong, by the way, just so you know. The word that appears in the Constitution of the United States is science. Yeah. It's really important, words matter. Not just words matter, what words mean matter, but we're still at the stage of words matter. Now, can you imagine the different conversation that we might have been having over the last number of years in this country if everyone understood that at least in reality, the word science does in fact appear in the Constitution. And for those of you who want to know where it is, it's in Article 1, the powers of Congress. Okay, it's Section 8, powers of Congress. Article 1, the legislature. Section 8, powers of Congress. It's where the patent office is set up to protect science. So, I'm going to leave that now. My only point being, a lot of us think that we know what the Constitution and what the Declaration and what the preamble and all that stuff says. And we do, to a large extent. But we also don't, to a large extent. And if we want to start having conversations with folks that are based on fact rather than opinion, you know, knowing that science is in the Constitution, I can say, look, you know, I think caring about science is really important. But it's not because Barney Davis thinks it's important that it actually, in fact, is important to this country of ours and our government. It's because it says so. It's in there. You know, I didn't make this up. If you want to get mad at somebody, don't get mad at me. You get mad at Thomas Jefferson. You get mad at the folks who put together all these documents, John Adams. Okay, so that's my point about knowing the fact that the words are what they are and that matters. But it doesn't answer the whole question of how to approach people. When you feel more comfortable, when you feel sure about what you're talking about in a factual way, obviously, you can be less defensive, and that's, I know what you're going to be talking about later, ways of actually doing the communicating between each other, and helping to rebuild our American community, our neighborhood. So we can talk to people who aren't necessarily our friends, who may not even actually like us. But our government doesn't require that we love each other. It requires that we behave properly towards each other, again, actions, when we are in community, when we are in our public space. We must treat each other with respect. And that's because that's written down too. I won't get into that today with you. But it's where we can go if you choose at any time. I'm available to come up and do workshops and whatever you want, or be available by phone. But I'm just trying to get the idea across that this country is based on being governed by a system of values that are actually written down. And you can point to the places where they come from. And once you have that, you're on very firm ground to make different kinds of arguments about things. The first one of which, I'd like to get to the issues. There are 3 issues that I'd just like to touch on. And model a little different way of perhaps coming at them when you talk with folks that heretofore we haven't quite been able to communicate with. And maybe who we can't, but just have a little bit different opinion. My understanding is that there is a lot of question these days about whether these founding documents actually apply to all of us. and there's a great deal of consternation about that. Is that so? Is that so in this group? If it is, I'd like someone to explain to me exactly what the question is, because I'd like to hear how you feel the issue. What is the issue with that?
So hold on a second, buddy. So do you guys understand where she's headed with this? This is off. So the Constitution, our founding documents, do you feel it applies to us?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
We're in a different crowd, Bunny.
Okay. So I'm really excited because that gives me more time to go over the other two, which I actually enjoy more. So thank you very much for that. But I would like to refer you to one piece of writing. If you run into people as you spread out and start to recapture your community, back for the people, we the people, start becoming again we the people rather than we the widgets or we the taxpayers and so before type thing. If you just want to become friends again with our fellow Americans, there is a pastor, her name is Reverend Rosemary Bray McNatt. It's capital MC, capital N-A-T-T. She is alive. She is an African-American woman. She is a pastor. She wrote a book called Unafraid of the Dark. And she apparently was coming up against a lot of folks saying, well, a lot of black folks especially saying, well, this Constitution wasn't written for us. Or women saying this Constitution wasn't written for us. And it doesn't apply, so why bother, kind of thing. And that is a big question in a lot of areas of this country. It has to do a lot with the originalist thinking of Scalia. And, one second, get rid of that. And what she said was, when people wrote all men are created equal, they really did mean men. But they didn't mean any other men except white men who owned land. That's what they meant. But because the ideas were powerful, there's no way that they could get away with holding on to that. It's not possible when you have an idea that's as powerful and as revolutionary as a country, founded on the idea that just because you're in the world, just because you're here, you have a right to certain things that are common to all humanity. She goes on to basically say, you can't put that idea back into the box. Once that idea is out, it had legs, it's going to run, and it's going to make a difference. So, we can dispense with that particular issue. Now I would like to talk to you for a minute about changing the contextual frame for healthcare. I found yesterday and last night's session, I told the group that Marlene and Tamarala and Joy didn't even know that I had found this, but I found something that I had written in 2009 to Gabby Giffords, who I was pretty friendly with at that time. And I was they were just starting to talk about health issues, and they were arguing about, who did what to whom, and what for branches, what division of government should take care of this, or whether we should even have a law, whether we even could have a law about health care. And she asked me to write some of my ideas down, which I did. And I'd like to read you just a little bit of parts of the things that I wrote to her in terms of how to maybe approach healthcare in a way that was a more general view of it, that could leave room for more specific work by people closer on the ground, grassroots work, for a big idea. What kind of big idea are we talking about? Well, just to put it into context a little bit more, I believe that the laws of this country, you've heard we're a system of laws, not of men, whatever that is, not of people. A proper law in this country, a law that will be considered valid, that will be not thrown out of court, is a law that is based on an American value that is written down in the preamble to the Constitution of the United States of America. And if you haven't memorized the Constitution, I was fortunate enough, unfortunately I'm old enough, to have been fortunate enough when I was in elementary school to have to memorize the preamble. And the preamble, you have that, that's part of my handout also. But the preamble has 6 action values in it. And what it says is that basically the government is established to do 6 particular things. And the way our government does anything is it passes a law. The government action is lawmaking. I mean, government doesn't do anything unless it's making a rule that we then have to put into effect. But these rules have to be based on something. It's not, again, because Bunny Davis thought it was a good idea, or Joe Dokes, or Antonin Scalia, or, you know, even George Washington. It has to do with why the country exists and what we're trying to accomplish. And they're all action words, they're all verbs. And if you look at on page 2 of the preamble, it says we have to form, establish, ensure, provide, promote, and secure things. Those are all things we have to do. Now, how do we get government to do something? Anybody? How do we make sure government does stuff?
Elect good people.
I can hear you.
We vote.
Vote.
We vote. We vote.
We vote. Exactly. We make sure we get people into office who are willing to do their jobs, which is to do these things. Make laws that form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure tranquility, domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. That's what we made the Constitution. So it's clear to everybody, supposedly, that this is what government's job is. And our duty is, as citizens, to elect people to office who are willing to do their job, not make up a new job. This is their job, not because Bunny Davis thinks it's a good idea. It's because what? It says so. This is the job description right here, okay? So any law that is proposed has to be based on one of these 6 things, at least, if not more. So to go back to health care, I took that thought. And what I said to Gabby, in part, was, we can spend a great deal of time, I would argue that it would be wasted time, debating the details and the merits and the weaknesses of any general health plan for this country. But it seems to me that our political leaders, especially at the federal level, would be spending their time better focusing on helping people define and understand and thus develop informed opinions about what I believe is the fundamental question involved in the health care debate. This is what I felt we should be discussing in 2009. Do we as a nation want people's health to be handled by a public or a private entity? Should people's health be a vehicle for profit or not? Is privatization anything more than a scheme by which a legitimate public function is taken over by private corporations whose interests lie with profits, not people? Or should it be a government action based on the duty to promote the general welfare? To promote the general welfare. Should a relatively small number of people be allowed to make money in the United States of America off of a much larger number of people's misery? When I was in law school, I remember learning that there are some things that government in the U.S. should not and does not make laws about. The prime example is parenting. There's no law defining what makes a good father or a good mother. That's your individual choice. There are no governmental sanctions in general for bad parenting, of course, unless you hurt someone. You're not allowed to do that. The area of child rearing is not left to the lawmakers in this country. Some laws just don't get made. On the other hand, Obviously, there are some areas that are most certainly within the government's duty to regulate by law. Some of these have to do with things that the private sector, with its profit motive above all, should not be permitted to rule. The private sector should not be permitted to call the shots. In my opinion, there is a strong argument that the federal government, by allowing private profiteers to control people's health, violates its duty to protect and preserve both individuals and the state itself, our government itself. The goal of our democracy is to have educated, see Thomas Jefferson, clear-thinking people participate actively in their government. If most of them are sick, it will be difficult, if not impossible, to sustain this nation as we have known it. That's a different conversation. It's a different way, in my view, to enter into the complex story of what healthcare is or should or shouldn't be. And it's what President Obama meant when he said, very simply and very eloquently, of course, you know, we do stuff together that we can't do alone. But it's based on promoting the general welfare. That is written down. And I defy anybody to argue how giving health care to folks doesn't promote the general welfare. But there are certainly arguments for how it's being done today that don't promote the general welfare, and therefore simply may be unconstitutional. In just a normal conversational way, I'm not saying you have to go running to court to file a lawsuit, but just in talking to people. You know, what's America about? It's about these values. And everything we do as a community, as a government, as being refereed by the government, it's supposed to be based on these values. Is there any question right this second? If not, I can go on to my last issue. Anybody have any questions?
Can I make a comment?
I'm sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. Bunny, can I make a comment?
Please do.
I just wanted to reinforce what you said. At the time that you wrote that letter, which I had no knowledge that you wrote that letter, at that time I was on a healthcare advisory council for Gabby. And as well actually doing some work with Ann Kirkpatrick, who was your representative at the time. And I will say that for sure, Gabby was not necessarily on the same page as Obama in terms of the healthcare legislation that was coming forward at the time. But I think that the impression that you made with your letter, sitting around a table with Gabby, talking about the value of providing welfare for the community at large, really hit home with her. So I think the kind of impact that reframing and using the Constitution had a direct impact, and I saw it in front of my eyes.
Thank you, Marlene.
Yeah, so.
You never told me that story, but you didn't know about my letter.
No, I never heard that story until yesterday, and I didn't want to interrupt yesterday, but I think it was, I mean, it just made a huge impact on her, and it reinforces the kind of impact that we can have when we recognize the value of our institutions and communicate it to the people we elect, because they don't always remember all of that either.
Or they don't know.
Right.
They don't know.
They don't know.
And it's our job to make sure that they do if they do. It's a new day. Instead of from the top down, them telling us what the Constitution says, we need to start reminding them what the Constitution says and what their job is, what their job description is. Not to make up stuff from ALEC or actually anything. I don't need to go one way or the other. You know, it's any think tank making up policy is insane. Well, just go back to home plate. You know, we got this Constitution. It's not very long, actually. It's only 7 articles. Then you get into the amendments, but you know. Is everybody ready? Okay. I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes on something that we don't talk about a whole lot in these days, which is state government. And the big issue of education. Okay? Our education system in this country was purposely left out of the federal Constitution. When you hear folks arguing that we shouldn't even have a Department of Education in Washington, some people go, yes, that would be right, we should. Some people go, are you kidding me? Of course we should. Well, that's everybody's opinion, which they have the right to, but if you want to go to the facts, one has to accept the fact that the word education does not appear in the Constitution of the United States. It was done purposely. It was one of the compromises that was made because a lot of the states were afraid when they were part of the Articles of Confederation and not the United States of America. They were afraid that they would be giving up much too much of their state sovereignty by allowing the federal government to dictate what the children and the people within the state learned about society, about how to live their lives, about how to be citizens of their state. My best example of this is, I'm from New Jersey originally, and I'm sure none of you can tell that from the way I talk. But even though I've been here for 45, 46 years, it's something that just doesn't disappear. So I'm a Jersey girl. And in New Jersey, we have a huge amount of a zoning law. Anybody know why? Can you give it a guess? Land use. Why do we have so much zoning law?
No idea.
Any ideas?
It's a small state.
There isn't a whole lot of land. There are a whole lot of people and not a whole lot of land. So the government, as its referee function in our public lives, has to come in and make a whole lot of rules about land use. You can't put these things here. If a road is here, there has to be so much room next to it before you start building a house because of safety, and on and on and on. So if I were a lawyer in New Jersey, I would have had to learn a lot of land use law, a lot of zoning law. Not so much in Arizona. In fact, we have almost none. Why? It's big. We've got a lot of land and we don't have a whole lot of people. But what we do have here is a lot of mining law. We have Zippo mine law in New Jersey. But we got a lot of mining law in Arizona because we have a lot of natural resources that are mined, especially copper. So that's the kind of states' rights thing that our founders were dealing with. And education fell in the area of, we want our children in Rhode Island to learn something differently than the children in Georgia. We won't go in, we don't have nearly enough time to mention the reasons why that would be different. Over time in history, things have kind of leveled out a little bit, but they were very, very protective of their ability to affect education of children. But it was never, ever the intent that education, public education, was seen by Thomas Jefferson as the most important thing to perpetuate freedom and democracy going forward. And the purpose of public education, the, quote, agenda that we keep hearing about, well, public education, yes, I say proudly, you betcha. We have government schools because Thomas Jefferson and the founders believed that.
Buddy, can you back up 1 second and repeat the last statement? She cut out, you cut out.
About government schools?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. When you hear people say that there is an agenda, my answer to reframe it is, you bet there's an agenda. We do have government schools. Why? Because we're supposed to, according to our state constitution. There is Article 11 of the state of Arizona Constitution sets up a system of public education. That is true of every single state in the country. And for a long time, it was almost required, not formally, completely, But it was understood after the Northwest purchases and several other historic things happened, if a territory wanted to become a state, it had to provide for free public education for children in that state. It looks a little bit different in every state, but it is part of every state's constitution. So that you can kind of argue, if you want to change the context, that our children between the ages in this state of 6 and 21 have the constitutional right to a public education which is, quote, as nearly free as possible. That language was changed relatively recently, I would say in the last 10 years, but within the last 40 years. But in many states, it's free, as it's a free public education. And the purpose is not to make us the wealthiest country in the world or to have the best entrepreneurs in the world. The purpose is to create good American citizens. That is the goal of public education. Well, if we're not teaching physics, right, that's what I'm thinking about, sitting here in my chair. If we're not teaching civics, and we're not teaching history in a way that's meaningful to children, how can we create good citizens whose main, most important, and I might argue only real duty to help this country survive, to protect and defend our democracy, is to vote. And it's to vote in a knowledgeable way, in a way that is based on fact, on the words of our founding documents, which still is the supreme law of the land. But our state constitution is the supreme law of the state as far as education is concerned. So our legislators, under Article 11, have a duty to provide a public education to all students between the ages of 6 and 21, who are as nearly free as possible, and that's where the wiggle words come in, and where we have to do our advocacy with our legislators to pass laws that comply with that, what that actually means. We used to have to pay for textbooks in this state. When I moved here in 1972, I came from New Jersey where everything was free. And here we had textbooks. Until very, very recently, and in some places I believe it still exists, corporal punishment is still allowed in Arizona public schools. Individual districts have passed policies that have abolished corporal punishment. Most of them in the bigger cities have. But there are many rural areas in this state where school personnel can, in fact, hit children to discipline them. So these are things that can only change if our laws change, and they change only if we elect the right people who understand what their job is and what the goal is. It's not to make us the best business-friendly state in the country. It's not to help individual private corporations make money. It's not even to create jobs. That sort of comes with territory when you have good citizens who want the economy to grow, to benefit and promote the general welfare. It's all based on what we should be doing, what our values are as Americans. And the education piece, one of the most important pieces to our founders, was purposely left to the states to do the job themselves because it was felt that it was closer to the people and it would do the job better than being further away. And as it turns out, as long as we let the people further away profoundly affect how we deliver public education to our kids, we really aren't living up to our responsibilities under the written words of state and federal constitutions and documents taken together. So that's my little spiel about public education as an issue that can be reframed from a legal, constitutional, founding documents kind of position Not saying you're wrong, you're right, you're wrong, you're right, because I just think so. Because it's what it says. And there are more details, but those will have to come at another time. So, thank you very much for listening to me. Unless there are some questions.
Imagine what she would be like if she was here in person.
I wish I could stand up so I could do it in person.
Tell her you have a question. We have a question, buddy.
Greg.
I just wanted to know if there's a copy of this letter. I just wanted to know if there's this letter in this packet.
We want to know if the copy of the letter
No.
that you just read is in the
No.
packet.
Can we create one?
I don't ask.
No, it is not, because I just found it. My one to Gabby?
Yes.
Yes.
We can make it available. I'm more than happy to make it available.
That would be-
Camarala and you guys, we can figure that out, but I will have it available if you'd like it.
That would be great.
Thank you so much.
Anybody else?
Up here, Marie.
Thank you.
Pass this to me.
Thank you, Kanya. I was wondering what your take was on the underlying issue regarding healthcare, regarding education, as funding. How do we approach our constituency? For example, I live in an area where we have a lot of working poor, retired poor, who believe that the Republican Party is going to save them. But even in relationship to education, a lot of times we compromise our state rights for funding to help support education. Well, how should we approach this aspect with the people that are in our areas that we're talking to?
Thank you, that's a really good question. I'm just going to give you theory without application because of our time here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good, because it sounded dead for a second. Every law that's made at the state level, including those that are made about education, has to comply with federal law. It can't be against federal law. So the federal law does have a role. It's kind of an overseer. Okay, so that's one thing. We're not completely cut off from the federal law. For example, in the area of civil rights or equal protection under the law, those things still apply in schools because we are all Americans. When we are actually not even just citizens, we are people who are present and using this public service. So we are covered by federal law. That having been said, I think it's important to understand that legislator's job is to make law, to legislate. Their job description is written both in the state constitution for the state and in the federal constitution for Congress. The very first job that they have, subsection 1, is to tax. That is numero uno.
Tax.
Oh, okay.
Tax.
To tax.
Got it.
Okay? In fact, wait a second, I dropped some, oh, there it is. My handy dandy little constitution, but I might need it for a second. I'm going to read you Article 1, Section 8, subsection 1. Powers granted to Congress. The Congress will have the power to lay and collect taxes, to pay and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. Okay? That's the same in Arizona. The very first job is to lay and collect taxes. How they do that, why they do it, that's up to us to get them to do right. If the only public service that is guaranteed as a constitutional right, in my view, in our state constitution, is the right of kids between the ages of 6 and 21 to public education as free as possible. That is a constitutional right, and that needs to be provided for through tax. You don't get it to disappear by not paying for it. That's not allowed. Why? Because it's written down. You put this together. Your number one job is to tax. If you don't want to tax, maybe you should go be an air conditioning salesman. You know what I'm saying? Years ago, almost always, legislators were lawyers. Everything will back to that. In my view, I think it's good for democracy that all kinds of people serve in legislatures, but especially state legislators. What has happened over the years is that fewer and fewer attorneys have been serving. And the good news about having attorneys serve, although not dispositive, is that we know the law. And we know this stuff. We're taught it. And it's our everyday work. So that the question of whether we should tax for public services that are required by the Constitution isn't even something that would come through somebody's mind. Well, the answer is, well, yeah. I mean, that's our job. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And we may have to make those taxes equitable, but maybe we need to figure out how to do that, and maybe people need to be educated to the fact that you want to ride the train, you have to buy the ticket. And that's what this country is about. If we lived in Tunisia or Syria, we wouldn't have to worry about taxes. We also wouldn't have to worry about educating our kids because it wouldn't be happening. So, pick your poison, so to speak. It's just the way our country works. And it works that way again. I hate to be boring, but not because Bunny Davis thinks it's a good idea, but because when you know the words, you put them together, it's clear what they mean. It's not mysterious.
Bunny, can you hear me?
I
can. So one of the things we were thinking we would do as we've progressed and we've grown is not just in the beginning talk to people about what the Constitution says, but exactly what she's doing here and how you apply that with a very clear and cogent a conversation. I want to say argument, conversation. So your information is backed up and you can do it without being excited about it. Because I get really excited about things. That's just how I am naturally. But having this information. So one of the things Bunny is going to be doing with us is building those a file. A file of samples, basically, for you to be able to use if you want to have a conversation about healthcare or energy or so on. And so then you can have that. And it's not going to be very big. It'll maybe be just little bullet points, but it'll be very helpful in your conversation with your neighbors. Any other questions? Hey, Bunny. Thank you.
Thank you, Bunny.
So we're going to go ahead and move on. So you all remember Prop 123?
Oh, yes.
And there were a lot of people that thought that that was a really awesome idea. We fought it tooth and nail. We actually got sued. Two of the people that we worked with, Morgan Abraham and Cheryl Cage in Pima County, with very little money. We had donated dollars up to $10,000. We got sued because they said there's no way we could have accomplished what we accomplished without being funded somehow illegally, and that wasn't the case. We lost. And we lost because we weren't as unified then as we are now. I don't think we would lose that this time. So I always collect newspapers, and now I'm just doing all my reading online, and I really don't like that. But this just gives us an idea of how important it is for us to have the right people in office. There's an Oro Valley lawmaker we cannot get rid of for the life of me because our local Democratic Party has been ineffective in this area. They have not used the PC system properly. It's something that we are trying to make a difference with right now with LD11. They refused to have us come in because they felt they were doing everything right, even though they were losing one election after another, Tig knows this very well. I want to point this one out, the Ducey appointed education tax. So Ducey, for 2 years, they spent money and investigated and did research about how do we improve our Arizona schools. But the way he wanted to go about it was he wanted to do an initiative called Classrooms First Initiative. Has anyone heard of that? Was under the radar. Basically what it was is if Joy here was in a school in a high poverty district, but she was getting all A's, and Shauna happened to be in a school district that they were getting D's, let's give more money to the school with the A's, because they must be doing something right. It has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that the children may be coming to school hungry, or that they only have a counselor half a day a week, or that they don't have proper books, or whatever, right? So he brought in his own people, and one of the people he brought in on this commission, the guy's name was Jim Swanson, the CEO of Kitchell Corp Construction. Anybody know him? You know Kitchell? Well, guess what he said after 2 years? We need $1 billion a year in public education, and we need you guys to tax. We need tax. And at the end of all of this 2 years, and what did Ducey do? 2 years, his people, he had his people to do this, and that was it. That was the end of the Classrooms First initiative. We also had another one, A for schools or whatever. It's all BS. So it's not enough to vote and disconnect. That was one of the things that Bunny gave a good example of with her conversation with Gabby Giffords. They're people just like us. You know, I always question myself, do I have the right education? Do I have the right this? I have just as much right to speak to my legislator as anybody else. And I think that, we have to make sure that we vote in good people, but then we make sure they know we have their back, but that we have our eye on them too. Hey, I don't want you to do this. It's okay. And it's much better if you do it in a collective way. So one of the things that we always ask is that they would come to the meetings, that they would show up, and then people have an opportunity to speak to them. Next slide. Next. So we just want to make sure that we're better prepared for an election. Go out in the community, go in people's houses. This is a group that we just met in someone's house. We, meet at a coffee shop, have a barbecue, join, there's a school event, go to the school event. There's events happening all over the place where a group of people are there, have conversations. You don't even have to be there to sign up, you can wear a badge that says, ask me. Is someone going to ask you then? If you have your petition, or you have something you want to talk to someone about or sign up, if that button's on there, it's really interesting. Just ask me. And they're like, ask you what? Right? Initiate. You're at a grocery store and you're checking checking out your groceries. They'll ask you, what do you mean? You're opening it up for a dialogue. So what we do, and we're going to go into a lot more detail with this. So Tig and Ed, they're on the cartography team. They're creating these defined geographic areas that are permanent areas, permanent neighborhoods that you work in. She's going to talk about it, and I apologize. I wish I had her maps up here. I don't. She's got a book, she's got some to share, and I'd like to introduce Tig to talk to you about the defined neighborhood concept, which is where you work within your neighborhood, you work early and often, and here's Tig.
Tig always asks the grocery store clerk and the people in line about voting and participating. I learned that from her.
Actually, I don't ask them. I respond when they ask me. Can you hear me all right? Am I using the mic correctly? Always, every commercial transaction you're checking out, and they say something like, hi, and how are you today? And I say something like, well, I'd be a lot better if those dreadful legislators hadn't just passed this awful law. And in fact, and then we start talking politics, and in fact, in our local Trader Joe's, they have now told the clerks, you can't talk politics with the customers. My name is Tig Gardner, and I am both chair of the North Side Democrats in Tucson, and this is Ed McCullough, standing there holding up the world. And Ed and I are also co-chairs of the cartography committee of the Arizona ground game. And Ed is much more qualified than I. He's a retired geologist, a professor of geology, former dean of sciences at the university, and he now works with the Samaritans, mapping and tracking, mapping the trails of the migrants, because the Samaritans go out and leave water on the trails. If we have time, I don't know if we have time, he'll have some stories to tell you about that. But as Tamarella said, the Northside, the Arizona ground game is definitely nonpartisan. The Northside Democrats is partisan. We're Democrats, of course. But we will work with any group that really wants to get out there and is interested in developing a neighborhood outreach program. This is not a new project. And in fact, it was not, granted there's a lot of bright people around coming up with new ideas all the time. But this project started, the Defined Neighborhoods, almost, I guess it was 8 years ago. It was started by Lena Saradnik, who was the first Democrat from a particular legislative area down there to get herself elected to the legislature in almost 30 years. It was a very heavily Republican area. And she went out and did it by person to person, shaking hands, direct contact, starting with her neighborhood, reaching out, and also every Sunday afternoon she had open house with home-baked goodies. And she totally blindsided the Republicans. She went off to Phoenix, was doing a great job, and within a year, unfortunately, she had a stroke. She's all right, she survived the stroke, but she could not continue, so she had to come back, and eventually she got well. We begged her to be chair of the legislative district. She couldn't quite manage that, but she became vice chair. And she said, we have to start doing grassroots. 10 years ago, that was the buzzword. Now it's all very common. But how do we do grassroots? So she got just a few people. Remember, we're all volunteers. I remember the first meeting, we sat together in some dreary little hall, half a dozen people saying, how can we get this started? What does it mean? Over the years, it has evolved. We've had, I think, almost 20 people, always all volunteers, getting together, trying to figure out what's the right thing to do. And it has evolved from that into a system, if you will, a project. But we think it works where we're doing it, and we hope that if you're interested in it, we can work together on it also. It's based on 3 fundamental principles. Neighborhood outreach is the way to go. Long-term continuity of contact. And volunteer happiness, I want to say, but volunteer satisfaction. This is all by the volunteers and for the volunteers. The paid political workers, the great district organizers and so forth, they have their way of doing things, but it's not always what volunteers feel comfortable with.
So you have a copy of the Defined Neighborhood sheet in your packet?
It's all in there, so yes, I will try to hurry along.
No, we're not telling you that to hurry. We just want them to know that.
Oh, well, let me tell you a few anecdotes. But this is also, yes, we're all amateurs originally, we're all volunteers and so forth, but this is also grounded very heavily in good, solid scientific research. Sociological research, well, I'm a former academic, so, but we'll call it good, solid research. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Green and Garber at the Yale Institution for Social and Political Research and Analysis and so forth. They spent 10 years putting together all kinds of research on voter outreach, how to get votes, how to win elections. And one of the most important conclusions they came up with is that I can't quote it exactly at this point, but the best, most effective form of voter contact in terms of getting out the vote. This is not necessarily in terms of getting a specific candidate elected, but in terms of getting out the vote. The most effective form of voter contact is by, and I quote, someone in the same social network. And of course that means, church, shopping center, whatever you do with other people. And the problem arises that if you're basically with a bunch of strangers, or you're just going to go out and canvassing, what kind of a social network can you tap into? Again, scientifically proven that the neighborhood is in itself a historically long-standing network concept in America. If you call up, or if I call up someone and I do this and say, hi, my name is Tig Gardner, I'm a volunteer with the Be Mechanic Click. Hi, my name is Tig Gardner. I don't think we've actually met, but I live in the neighborhood. Just down the street across from the school, maybe you're near Sally Hansen's house. The conversation, the contact is on a whole different level. Far, far more effective than awfully nice young people every 2 years going and knocking on doors. And the second part of it, that it's got to be long-term continuity of contact. That is, the same person contacting the same people over and over again, instead of a different contact every time. Far more effective, far more cost-efficient. Again, am I using this properly?
Yes.
I want to wave it around. A little closer to my mouth. Oh, yes. The repetition of contact by the same person, again, very scientifically recognized phenomenon. It's been called the exposure effect, the familiarity effect, and it leads to what is widely used in marketing. The person with whom you have the contact, who has said something to you 3 times, even though it's not something important, you begin to believe it. They become what's called the trusted messenger. And so the whole idea is to establish permanent networks, permanent neighborhoods, in which there is, ideally in each one, a democratic, and again, we're the North Side Democrats, so we're assuming this is all Democrats, a democratic, permanent democratic neighborhood representative who is the trusted messenger. And it only takes about 3 contacts to become one, well, according to some people's research. The process that we have okay, I was going to ask if Ed would, but that's okay. The general idea, oops, not that, that's got my notes.
She wants her notebook held up, right?
Yeah, not just yet. First I have to have my own cheat sheet here, as it were. Basically the process is we take the voter registration data for the precinct, and the precinct unfortunately is the lowest level we can go down to. And as you know, they're getting bigger and bigger because the supervisors are allowed to combine adjacent precincts if there are a great number of vote by mail people. Pretty soon the precinct is not going to be any use at all. And again, that's why we need to define permanently these neighborhoods on the sub-precinct level. We take the voter registration data, we put it into a mapping program. We were using the VAN. We're now using a program called Maptitude, which is made by the same company that makes the mapping software that the Redistricting Commission uses. So it's really good. We divide the entire precinct into defined neighborhoods based on 2 criteria. And the first one is 60 to 80 Democrats, Greens, and other party voters, the DGOs. And that's because this is really the target for the volunteers. These are the people, these are your social work caseload, if you will, to be reaching out to. Volunteers' comfort level is very good with Democrats. Reaching out to independents takes a little more effort, if you will. You don't have to deal with Republicans. I know a lot of volunteers are scared. I don't want to talk to those people. Well, we feel in this project, you don't have to. That's the candidate's job. They've got to go out there and fight against them. In Arizona, we need to get the independents, as you know. And the way to do it is through the neighborhood contact. So every neighborhood has 60 to 80 DGOs. We did start saying Democrats, others, and Greens, but then we didn't like the DGOs. The second criterion is it's got to hang together physically, geographically as a neighborhood. It's got to make sense that it can be driven along one route, that it's not divided by a wash, that it's not widely separated socioeconomically. You don't want to combine bits, of course, of a trailer park on one side and a gated community on the other. So it really takes someone from the precinct, from the area, has to look at the map before we can kind of write it in stone. But once that's done, I've passed out some here. I'm sorry we didn't bring enough. And in fact, we will take, first of all, we'll take the precinct itself and subdivide it into divisions, if it's one of these great big ones that have been made by combining. That's 600 to 800 DGOs. There should be one on every table. We also have in the back some of the old notebooks. I'll be telling you about them. But anyway, here we are. The goal is, okay. The goal, as I said, is to find eventually someone who will be the Democratic representative in each of these neighborhoods. Or we'll take maybe 2 or 3. That's again the point of having it down to 60 to 80. You get a little more than that, and we find that volunteers say, oh, 100, I can't deal with that. Yes, here's the maps. Here, for example, is the divisions. There were 2 in this, and here are the defined neighborhoods in this. Generally, a PC is the best person to be the precinct coordinator or the division coordinator. But again, if you can find a volunteer, starting from the top down, as it were, a volunteer who will be the precinct coordinator, whose job, it's really kind of a pyramid scheme. Their only job is to find a volunteer for each of the neighborhoods in the division. And the precinct coordinator, we put together, again, using strictly the data from the voter registration stuff. We'll put together these notebooks with the materials. There's the maps. There's instructions on how to read this book, just in case. The precinct coordinator or division coordinator, first of all, gets all the maps of the individual neighborhoods. You recognize these are the old van maps, what we used to call the measles maps, for each individual neighborhood. And then there are all the data sheets for each. This is the breakdown by party, political party, for the neighborhood, and also the percentage turnout by political party in the last major election, as compared with the entire precinct. And the point of having all of these for every neighborhood is that then you can kind of have a party, get people in, have coffee, spread out the maps, spread out the data, and say, hey, pick a neighborhood, or they can study it. Then you also get a complete alphabetic directory of all the voters. And this, I think, we all decided is very important. These lists, and the ones that you'll get in, the neighborhood volunteers get, have the Republicans and the Libertarians added in. because you need to know the context of the household that you're dealing with, or the Democrat, or especially the independent. And if I see a household that's got 2 R's and an O, that's probably not an O I'm going to deal with at the moment. But if there are 2 D's and an O, I'm going to contact them. And we've always found this is very important. Marlene, I think if I could tell your story of going to a house, very often with the campaigns you only get the list of Democrats. And going to a house with a newly registered Democratic woman, I thought she was 19 years old, but she was 40 or something. And talking
She moved from Florida, that's why she was newly registered back to her home.
She moved from Florida and moved back to her home, newly registered, having a nice chat. She's a Democrat, and up comes the large, angry, right-wing husband, or if it's, and I know someone else with a young Democrat, but it was her father, and saying, what, a Democrat? What do you mean you're registered as a Democrat? We don't have no Democrats in this house. This is a danger. It really is. And so we feel that if you're going to reach out to voters, you have to have the entire context of what you're doing. And this also gives the precinct coordinator every voter you can look up. If somebody says, have you tried Sally Jones? You can right away look up Sally Jones without having to log into them and find out that she's a Republican. And say, well, thank you, I'll be in touch with Sally one of these days, but not right now. This section over here, then, these 3 columns, we call your long-term target table. It's for anyone who is a DG or O. If they are not on the Pebble, there's a big fat no. If they did not vote in the last major election, there's a big fat no. And if they are a 4x4, and that I think now you all know someone who voted in the last 4 federal elections.
And everybody knows what a Pebble is, right?
Oh, Pebble, yes. Some people don't know Pebble. You know Pebble, a permanent early voter list, right. The 4x4s, also, I think the professionals call them high-efficacy voters. That's like calling rich people high-net-worth individuals. And anyway, if they are a 4x4, and again, we're taking the data out and running it through yet another software program so we can make that calculation and show it as a single thing. If they are a 4x4, it says 4x4 exclamation point. And of course, these are going to be the people you're going for first to try and get them to be neighborhood volunteers. So that's, we feel at this point, these are the data that volunteers find useful, and as we get more comments, we'll change them or add them. Then the other thing that the precinct coordinator gets is the geographic, as we call it, also known as walk list arrangement. Again, the same voters, the same information, but now arranged alphabetically by street name and within that by house number, so you do get that full household composition. Some people also refer to this as the who's sleeping with whom list, the first one they look for. And this is where you will say, oh, 2 R's and an O, and so forth. And then there's a place for notes. And then that's the instrument to help the precinct coordinator. Then each one, okay. Then the idea is that the individual neighborhood volunteers, they get a packet which has instructions, and then it's got the the neighborhood, defined neighborhoods map for their entire division, so they can see where they're located. What else have we got? And then it's got the measles map. And again, we're using, and I don't have any of our new ones with me because we generate them as soon as people want them and give them right away. We don't stockpile, so that the information that everyone gets is the most recent stuff. So this is the old map of the individual neighborhood. This is the same. I need 3 arms to do this. Yes, no, that's okay. Yeah, I'm sorry we don't have this on slides. We should have put it on slides. You get, next time, it will be on slides. And then you get the same thing. You get the alphabetic index with the target table, but this time it's just of the neighborhood, your particular neighborhood. And what's different in this is the last section, which I will let's just open up and show a page. This is the geographic catalog, but for the neighborhood volunteers, for every Democrat, Green, and other party voter, there's about half a dozen extra lines, extra space, where you can keep your notes over the long term. So you can say, you know, and these are the kind of notes that you don't get out of the van. Things like, you know, her grandson's great uncle is in the same lodge with Joe's brother. The kind of things that in order to be a part of the neighborhood and make effective contact are really helpful to have. One of the problems with the van is that you cannot limit the R's to 1 line and the DGOs to 6. If we did this out of the van, it would be 2 or 3 times the size. The R's only just get 1 line because you're really not interested in saving information about them. This, I just want to get rid of that. I'm sorry, we're supposed to be.
What if they switched last week?
This is what the North Side Democrats decided. You have, indeed, yes. And then I will speak heresy. We have all views here. This packet, and indeed the notebook if we can, the easiest way of distributing it is as a PDF by email, and individuals can print them out to save all the costs of central printing. But again, the precinct coordinator can print out all the packets for their neighborhoods if they want to. However, this we send out in an interactive PDF. That is, the space where you can keep your notes works on the computer. You can do all of your work on the computer if you want. You can keep your notes there. It's simply an interactive PDF field. But if you want to, some people have said, you know, oh, I don't want to go out in the rain, knocking on doors with all these papers flapping and so forth. You can just put it on your iPad if you want. We're trying to make it convenient for everyone. So I think that's really, could I give my bit of heresy right now? Because we also have information, suggestions on how to make first contact with Democrats, first contact with independents. I know that everything traditionally is about canvassing, that is walking. As we're developing this, we run into a lot of volunteers who say, yes, what?
That's not heresy.
Well, it's heresy sometimes. Who say, I can't walk. I can't volunteer because I can't walk. My leg is bad. I don't like walking, etc., etc. You don't have to walk. You don't have to knock on the doors of strangers. There are a lot of other things a volunteer can do. And we need a lot of volunteers. Not everybody is going to want to go out and be friendly with their neighbors. They may want to get together with another neighbor and have a party and invite everyone. Some people like to make phone calls, but they don't like face-to-face. I'm a great believer in phone calls. I'm a great believer in leaving voicemail messages. And again, there are lots of ways, and of course you know this already. But there are a lot of people now who, because of the economic conditions, work from home. I don't like, and I used to work from home, I don't like it when a stranger comes and knocks on my door, or even a neighbor, frankly. You know, hi, can I drop in and chat? You know, I've got a deadline in an hour. I don't want this. People find it intrusive. And I don't knock on other people's doors because, for me, I think it's kind of rude. What I would do is combine various things. I have parties. Oh, and Costco has some wonderful wines that people like to drink. Good way to do it. But I also like the lit drop, as it used to be called. Just regularly going out and handing out an interesting piece of political literature. And what I will do is call up the people and say, hi, I'm Tigard, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to be running around the neighborhood on Saturday handing out some literature. I'll knock on your door, but you know, if you're busy, don't bother answering. I'll stick it under the door. And if you really, you know, don't want me doing that, look, here's my phone number. Just give me a call, leave a message, and I promise, because I don't like people to do that to me. I get a very positive response to that, and I have even had people call up and say, thank you. I don't like people coming to my door. Thank you for letting me opt out. But yeah, on Saturday, please do ring my bell. I'd like to talk with you. So that's my little bit of heresy. So.
Thank you.
And again, she has samples of books in the back that you can take a look at.
Thanks, Tig. And I don't know why Tig thinks that is, I think that's heresy, because that's the way we organize, so it's really kind of, whatever. But
I call it heresy because, let's just say I have had stated that to field directors of the campaign who say, oh, no, you've got to knock on the doors, you've got to knock on the doors. And frankly, part of that is because with the, let's say, the paid professionals as opposed to the volunteer amateurs, their work is assessed, and their paychecks and so forth, and their promotion are assessed by quantitative measures. And the only things you can quantify are numbers of doors knocked on, numbers of phone calls made. And what we're working at is not quantifiable, but qualitative, the quality of the contact.
absolutely.
Thank you.
And I'm sure people in this room have had the same issues with the coordinated campaign coming into our neighborhoods with lots of people from out of state who don't understand the community, and it's certainly something that we're trying to push forward to the, not necessarily as part of the ground game, but as part of people who are also Democratic elected officials and their LDs, etc., to the state Democratic Party, that we really need to go beyond what the coordinated campaign people do and hire people locally. If we're gonna hire people, pay them locally, get them involved, educate them about the community, work with the Democratic Party leaders. And if there's any message that personally I can get across today, is I hope that we all work together to communicate that to the state. Yes?
Maybe you're going to get to this, but one question I've had as I sit here is, how do you recruit people to do this work in the neighborhood?
That's exactly what I'm going to talk about right now.
So organizing your precinct,
For political action, that's the next sheet we're on.
Okay, so I know in some respects you guys are great, you're well organized, we really appreciate what a great job Coconino County and parts of Yavapai County and have done in terms of helping to elect Democrats and working on petitions, etc. And so I sort of felt like I was bringing coals to Newcastle. Do people know what that expression means?
Yes.
Okay, because Tamarella didn't. I guess it's an age-related thing. It's like preaching to the choir, basically. But I'm starting out with an example from my legislative district, from somebody who's a precinct coordinator from my legislative district that was initially recruited, though, by the Arizona Ground Game, because we felt it was, even though we're nonpartisan, we really wanted to help find volunteers and PCs for people whose beliefs we agreed with. So we recruited Patty, who was not active politically at all before, but with all the problems we saw after the last election, or with the last election, decided she needed to become active. So Precinct 99, and there's actually somebody in this room from Precinct 99, who happens to also live in Flagstaff part-time. Precinct 99 was, you can put on the next slide, Joy, was a really good precinct even before we became involved. So we targeted, so Patty started out by handing out letters to everybody in her, neighborhood. We have samples of the letters that she handed out, and you might want to change them a little. I mean, we hope that you will want to change them to meet your own needs. And you might want to do something like even put a photograph on your letter. We have a link to all these letters so that she could recruit people in all the various neighborhoods which TIG had turfed for her. TIG and Ed. I didn't know Ed was involved at that time, so. Which TIG had turfed for her and had worked with Patty, I think, to identify appropriate boundaries as well. I know when I did my neighborhood, TIG and I sat down and actually fixed her original turfing because I was so much more familiar with the boundaries of the different neighborhoods in my precinct. And then she got together, she handed out the letters first, kind of like what TIG said about making the phone calls. Handed out the letters first. If she knew the people, she actually knocked on their door and sometimes made phone calls. Did not do a lot of emails. I think emails, if you have people's emails, it's a good way to do it, even though they ignore it. And I wanted to add to what TIG said in terms of voicemails. I think text messaging, and especially if you want to attract younger people, is a better way of doing it than voicemails. Because I don't always listen. Yeah, no, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm just adding on that we should be text messaging. And a lot of us are volunteers who are older who don't think about text messaging, but I think it's sort of, almost everybody's doing texting at this point. So anyhow, there's the letters. Patty had parties. Jane could actually even explain more how Patty reached out to get a slew of volunteers. I mean, she had 1 million volunteers. I'm exaggerating, but she used that 60 to 80 number that TIG mentioned, got all of those volunteers recruited. She did not have a full group of PCs. They never had enough PCs. They only had volunteers plus 2 PCs. And then we thought, well, she's not going to be able to do much better. We targeted midterm voters who didn't vote in the last midterm. We targeted voters who did not vote in the last midterm to try to get them out to vote. And so in 2014, she was precinct 99, she had 77.9% of people who had voted in her neighborhood, and we thought, well, that's going to be really hard to improve upon. However, she did it. She went from 77.9 to 89.9. And as any any of you have known who know statistics, it's easier to go from 50% to 70% with a targeted campaign than it is to go at the higher end, because you've already reached the people who are going to vote. So this is really impressive. So I want to impress on you that you're never too good to not do better. Go ahead.
Can I ask sort of the flip side of that?
Sure.
Is there a point where a neighborhood is so reliable your efforts are better spent elsewhere?
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, and it's something that that we have responded to. So, for example, even though I totally believe in the neighborhood concept, we have precincts in Pima County, and I know you guys have precincts here that have basically no PCs identified, no volunteers identified, who we really need to get the vote out. And so we've asked, and Patty is a big proponent of this, we have asked those precincts that have done such a great job to identify neighboring precincts that they can go out and help recruit at least 4x4 voters to become volunteers, and then have them help find people in their own neighborhood. So we're not technically doing it initially by a neighborhood concept, but we have to reach out to those people, and that's one good way of doing it.
It's called Adopt a Precinct.
Yeah, it's called Adopt a Precinct.
We kind of mentioned this in Sedona 2 nights ago, because Sedona has like 90% turnout in a lot of their areas. And Kathy Rutherford had mentioned that she still thinks there's a value in going out, because there's some education that we need to do about propositions, like propositions that are worded strangely, maybe some candidate down ballot races, those kind of things. So the idea is not to completely ignore your own neighborhood, say, we're good, we don't have to do anything, but maybe not having to go as often, or, once you've already done it for a certain amount of time, then it becomes more, it just becomes easier, you go less.
We're not telling people to not go and keep contact with their own neighborhoods. We're just having them reach out to other neighborhoods that really do need the help. Jane.
To enlarge a little bit on what you're saying about the propositions and other informational things, is that we, as we walked first to get out the vote, we said, in 6 months we'll be back when we have more information. We're going to be coming around with information about the propositions, information about the various candidates and what they stand for, and emphasize the fact that we're distributing information, not telling them what to do, but we're going to bring back information. And they said, oh, good, and I've had the same experience that I put my name and my number on the information, and I've had people call me back and say, can you bring me some more information after we've done that.
In LD9, we got so excited when we passed out information that we kept a tally of how many phone calls we got back from people who we didn't really interact with, but we left information with. And it kept growing and growing and growing, especially once we added on, once we gave the information about the propositions, because so many people don't understand the propositions, and the campaigns don't talk about the propositions. But we care about the propositions. That's why we elect our voters, to bring those things to the forefront, to make sure they get recognized. We're having a meeting next week of precinct leaders, and to get together, and one of the objectives in that meeting of precinct leaders is to identify all the precincts that don't have enough volunteers and PCs, and devise new and more exciting ways to reach out to them. And sometimes we just need to go to libraries that are in their neighborhoods, meet people in libraries. Everybody thinks of libraries, but like mobile home clubhouses, or shops that might be. So in Tucson we have Penzeys Spices, for example. They are pro-Democrats, so we could stand outside their door. We haven't done that, but I mean, it's one possibility. There are certainly places that we can go to where we can reach some of the other people. And yes, we believe in our neighborhoods, but we really have to enlarge our base, especially for the presidential election.
Especially if you have businesses in your neighborhood area.
Exactly.
That everybody goes there.
Exactly, and none of us have done a very good job at that in the past. I don't know if you guys have, but no. Okay. What? Yes, the other thing I want to talk about, and this is a group of precincts that we didn't have a lot of PCs, that we did help with, and we did focus on. That's, I guess you can't see the numbers there, it's 31, 32, and 38. And if you look in 2014, and for example, 32 had a lot of registered Democrats. They only had a turnout of 46% in that midterm. We increased that turnout to 72%. And so we thought, well, LD9 is a great Democratic area. We have a lot of Democrats, but we had a lot of precincts that didn't get them out. And what we did is we used the concept that Tig talked about is, so we did have a PC lead in 32, I think, yeah. And a lot of us went to her mobile home community, and we did not just a canvas, we did exactly what Tig is referring to, is we did postcards, we did letter writings, we put our trifolds into envelopes and wrote personal notes in those envelopes, and mailed them out because we couldn't get into a lot of people's homes and neighborhoods, and it was effective. And I will tell you that people like Tig, who say they don't like to walk, sometimes do get convinced to walk. So, for example, we had, at the Get Out the Vote part, we had a group meeting at my house every week for 6 weeks. We would have 40 volunteers come to the house. Some people said, we only want to write postcards. Some people said, most people didn't say this. A couple people said, we'll make phone calls. People hate making phone calls. Some people texted, and some people walked. Well, by the last couple of weeks, all the people who said they weren't going to walk saw that people came back enthusiastic, or even kind of down. But we'll go out and walk too. And so I still believe walking is the best way to reach people, because face-to-face contacts are so much more important than, they're just more powerful. They're more powerful than phone contacts. I mean, obviously some people can't walk, but you know, we had a guy with terrible Parkinson's disease who came to the house and said, well, I'm walking. And I said, you are? That's wonderful. But he said, I have my wife with me, and we'll take turns, and she can drive some of the time, and I can walk some of the time. You know, there are always things that people can do. And you have to remember that it's important to engage people where they are, but they may decide to do more and more and more, especially if they feel valued. And I just can't say how important that is. So you have to have a multifaceted technique. You have to work with the neighborhood concept. But you also have to work with the coordinated campaign people. And we usurp their volunteers. We now make phone calls to people who worked with the coordinated campaign and say, would you like to volunteer in our neighborhood? And we've gotten a lot of people who have done that. So you have to reach out to all over the place to answer your thing.
Yeah. One of the things I want to interrupt, I don't know if you've been familiar with this, but you have a coordinated campaign or other campaigns, even the Obama campaign, that come in and they corral all of these volunteers. And what do they do with that list when they leave? They take it with them. Yeah. What is that about? How does that help us? So everywhere we go, we encourage you, contact the ADLCC, contact the coordinated campaign, get that list. Those are people that felt it was really important for them to be involved, and they are the first ones that may continue to be involved.
And we got that list, and we are putting that list along with other volunteers that we have recruited on our own. And people are willing to do it. I also think that messaging is important. I don't think that kind of messaging that Tim relished for candidates is not important too, but we developed this time, and you guys might be interested in using it. These are palm cards, not trifolds.
They're cheaper to use, cheaper to produce than trifolds. And trifolds work some of the time, but people throw them out a lot too. These you can, put on your refrigerator. Still, people do that, I think, even though they're stainless steel refrigerators. But you can keep them close by. They're colorful, and you can also use them as postcards. So these are postcards. They fit the postcard regulations. You can put labels here. There's room. We did it so there's room on the back to write a little message and write your name and phone number. Again, a way for people, and you can use it for various issues. You don't have to wait till the campaign to use it. It's another way to introduce yourself to your neighbor. You can also put it in an envelope with a personal letter if you choose to do that. So, and they're cheap. So we got these printed at the Glue Factory, which is a union shop in Tucson, for $1,000 for under $100. So, we probably will need more than 1,000. So obviously you're not going to use our postcards, but I'm just using this as an example of, and postcards do work, and there is also research on showing that postcards work too. We're just a little bit worried that people are going to start to get burned out on postcards as well. So this is multifunctional. And then the last thing I want to talk about again is the whole targeting concept. So this is another map that TIG did. This is a precinct that we have. It's actually Tamarella's precinct. It's a funny precinct because it's divided into two very separate areas. These are the people who didn't vote in 2014. We targeted those people. We had a lot of neighborhood volunteers here too. It was a lot of people who didn't vote. And these were the people who voted in this year's midterm.
Who did not, those are the last that did not vote.
Yeah, those are the ones who did not vote. So, we decreased the number remarkably again, and people said, oh, those are people we're not going to impact, but we did impact. So again, the concept of neighborhood parties, neighborhood get-togethers at a neighborhood level rather than at a LD level or a county level. And again, they had a Cinco de Mayo party the other day. And it was all the volunteers in that neighborhood, and then they invited new neighbors who hadn't been participating. So, people said, oh, it's too early to be doing this. It's not too early. It is never, ever too early.
Next slide.
You get on New Year's Day.
So, when people first start walking in their neighborhoods and getting to meet people in the neighborhoods, they're thinking, oh man, I don't want to, but the packet helps you, right? The packet, you know who you can talk to. They would think, oh, there's no other person in this neighborhood that thinks like me. There's not another Democrat here. Linda Horowitz, that's the way she felt. She lives in this fancy schmancy northern foothills area, and she now has a full cadre of precinct committee people. She understands that probably a third of the people in her precinct are Democrats. She didn't understand that before, and she understands that more than half of the independents lean Democratic, which she never would have known without going out and talking to them. So that's something that people usually think. It's really not the case.
Well, and actually, she recruited a Republican who is now leading our initiative on the hospitality to welcome new PCs and volunteers into our county. So don't ignore the Republicans.
So, so your packet has a bunch of information, and also, Shauna, sorry, we have a lot of links, and I want to send those to you so you can share those via email. The scripts that are here, and I know that Jamie and John have to get going, so we're going to work on that, but there's your personal stories in here. We'll talk about that later, and there's scripts in here that you will get as a Word doc, so you can change them and modify them. So this is the whole list of things that are in your packet, and there's, some of these things took us years to put together, 2 years. Others are a little simple, but take your time when you get home, take a look at it. It's important information. Okay, next. Yes, so we like to give you guys a little break from the seriousness of this, but to go into a little fun exercise about about the, situations you may run into if you're going and knocking on someone's door. So Shauna was gracious enough, and John and Jamie are going to come up to the front and give us some ideas of scenarios that you may run into when you knock on someone's door.
Yeah, what do you want?
Hi, I'm your neighbor. What's your name?
Jamie.
Jamie, I'm John. I live right down the street from you.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I was wondering if I could talk to you for a minute or two. You got a moment?
Well, I got kids back here. And they're just screaming. You hear them?
Oh, yeah, I can hear them.
Yeah, they're really just, yeah, and I really got to get back to them.
Okay, how about if I leave you my name and number, and I'll give you a call?
Sure.
And I'm in the neighborhood. Want to talk to you about things that are happening in Arizona, because fellow Arizonians
I know.
we're very concerned, yeah. So I'll come back and touch base with you again.
Well, thanks.
Good luck with the kids.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah?
Hey, hi Fred. I'm a neighbor from down the street. How you doing?
How do you know my name?
I have this information that I'm walking the neighborhood here, talking to fellow Arizonans about things that are happening in our state.
Well, I don't vote. I don't do any of that anymore.
You don't?
No.
Why not?
Because they don't listen to me. And my vote doesn't count.
It doesn't count. It does count. And they don't listen to you. You talk to them. You tell them what you're interested in.
No.
Well, maybe if we work together and get other people in the neighborhood to get together, we can help influence them.
Well, what do you got?
Well, I'm going to have a party next week.
Party?
Like free
beer?
food? Yeah, free beer. Yeah. Come on down.
Good.
And we can talk about it.
Historic?
Historic beer? Sure, yes. Sure, whatever you want. All right. Well, thank you very much. Here's my card.
All right, thank
Contact
you.
info. I'm your friendly neighborhood
And
representative.
again, your name is what?
John.
John.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thanks, John.
Okay.
I'll see you. When the party is what time?
At 7 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll try to be there.
All right.
All right.
Okay. Talk to you later. Bye.
Yeah, so, would someone in the audience like to come up? I'll give you an example. So I'll go ahead and you'll be the neighborhood person as well. And I'll be
Okay.
okay.
Turn the light on.
Huh?
Turn the light on.
On the screen?
Just put a piece of paper in front of it.
Just put the shape, the
Alright.
thing in front
Okay.
of it.
Okay.
All right.
Oh, hi, hold on a second, hold on.
Okay.
Where's the bee? How can I help you?
Hi, I'm your neighbor, John, from down the road.
Oh, John,
And
I'm so busy with my kid. Is there anything I can help you with? Or...
cute little kid there. Yeah. Well, I just want to tell you that I'm here.
Oh, would you mind holding my baby for a minute?
Oh,
Sweet mom, thank you very much. Oh, yes.
So I'm talking with people in the neighborhood about Arizona issues and things that are important to us, and seeing what we can do to, the legislature is really doing some crazy things.
Oh, I gave up on them already. I really just focus on environmental issues.
Environmental issues?
Yeah.
But that's the legislature is on
Oh,
that
they
too.
don't do anything really, do they?
They do. They have the power to do it. We
Really?
tell them. They work for us.
Oh, I never felt that way.
You wouldn't think that. They don't tell us what to do.
Oh,
You know,
and what was
we're
your name
supposed to tell
again?
them. John.
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 And who do you represent?
I represent Arizona. I'm working with the Democrats.
Oh,
But
okay.
I'm really concerned about Arizona issues.
Well, I like that. Thank you very much.
Because we're all Arizonans and Americans, right?
Yeah.
Not
Oh, do you want to come in? We have to change a diaper.
Oh, come on.
What happens is we
hand when you go with them. Because what happens a lot is you're going to be the person answering the door.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm your neighbor. I live down the street. I just want to tell you about an exciting thing that I'm doing. I'm just so happy about it, and I wanted to make sure that you knew all about it. So that's what I found when I had this one person. She was so excited. Their arms were out there. And so the next time I said, just hold your arms behind your back. And then when you go and they answer, and someone's at the door, step back. Just step back a bit and make sure that you give space for both of you, because you may be excited and they don't know who the hell you are, right? Let me think if there's anything else. Oh, the other thing is listen. You know, we're going, I'm not doing this, and blah, 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 you know, and you have no clue what they want or how they're going to react to you or what it is that's important to them. So be more of an active listener in the process and make it really short. So we have, someone come on up, just one person.
He's the knocker.
He's the knocker, okay.
Yeah, hello.
Hello, welcome. I'm John, your neighbor from down the street. How are you doing today?
Hi. Okay, I got a little bit of a hangover, but I'm all right.
Oh, I can relate to that.
It's only 1 o'clock on a Saturday.
Yeah. So what do you do for a living?
I'm a bartender.
After
hours, after hours.
Oh, after hours.
Really late. Yeah.
All right. Well, great. Well, I wanted to talk to you today about issues that affect Arizonans.
Oh yeah, well I could use a bigger paycheck. Can you fix
Yeah, that would be great. I could use one too. Who do you think's going to help with that?
I don't know, but I think all the illegals are taking all the good jobs, so I think we got to help President Trump. How are you going to do that?
Well, let me ask you, do you believe in this?
Oh, no, I'm not for lying. I don't really, I'm not totally all about the guy. I just think the liberal media is too hard on him
But
sometimes.
aren't we all Americans? Aren't we all Arizonans?
Yeah.
And what is the American values? Do we accept our neighbors? Do we accept anybody that comes into America? Or not?
I don't know. It depends on who they are.
So this is we're getting more into the weeds than we
Sorry,
started.
I shouldn't have gone
got
into that. Talk about my paycheck.
The paycheck.
Okay, we would really like it if somebody would try to be the
door knocker.
door knocker. Can anybody
neighbor.
try? Well, we don't want to put anybody on the spot, but Jane, you want to do it?
Okay. And this will be our last one.
Sure. Okay, we'll break down.
Look great, a dancing woman coming up. Who is it?
Hi, I'm Jane. I'm from down the street. I live right around the corner from you.
Oh yeah?
I have some information for you we're out sharing today.
I've got this video game and I'm playing it online,
Okay.
and my friends are over there doing all this.
Okay, can I give you the information? And my name and number is on here if you have any
What's the
questions.
information about?
It's information about the proposition that we have coming up on the next election.
Oh.
So
I haven't heard anything about it.
Yeah,
but I
this
really-
is good information. I'll let you get back to your video game and call me if you have any questions.
Okay, I will.